Good afternoon. My name is Meryl Johnson. I am a retired teacher, having taught 40 years in the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, and I am so happy to be here with you today. You know, when I was going to Cleveland schools, I went to Miles Standish Elementary School, and we were surrounded by music. I had the best music teacher in the world, Elizabeth Clark, and I was able to go to the Severance Hall every year. Every year, all Cleveland students went to see the orchestra perform at Severance Hall. I remember learning about John Philip Sousa and Stars and Stripes Forever. I learned about Rimsky-Korsakov and the Flight of the Bumblebees. I learned about the Lone Ranger theme, William Tell Overture. All that I learned while attending Cleveland schools. Unfortunately, because of budgeting issues, music has really been placed on the back burner in schools, and sometimes totally off the stove. So I think that's why I'm so glad that Pat was able to suggest this program, Pat Blahoviak, and it's just for you to see how important music is to the educational growth of our students. So I'd like to welcome our guests that we have with us today. We have Kimberly Meier-Sims, and Kim is a violin faculty member of the Cleveland Institute of Music, director of the Sato Center for Suzuki Studies at CIM since 2004, and she's a registered violin teacher trainer through the Suzuki Association of the Americas. And I must mention that in the summer of 1986, she studied violin and pedagogy with Dr. Shinichi Suzuki in Matsumoto, Japan, at the Talent Education Research Institute. We are being joined by her husband, Stephen Sims. He is a violinist and also an instructor at the Cleveland Institute of Music Sato Center for Suzuki Studies, as well as an adjunct secondary instructor at the Conservatory. And he has been a violin instructor in the El Sistema program when it was at University Circle. And our third guest is Ariel Clayton, and she is an instructor in this very exciting Rainbow Strings program at Chambers Elementary in East Cleveland. I was fortunate enough to observe her class and to also observe Kim's class yesterday, and I was so impressed. But Kim moved to Cleveland from Dallas in 2007 to study at the Cleveland Institute of Music, receiving her bachelor's and master's degrees in violin performance. She received teacher training in the Suzuki method at the Sato Center. And she's also an artist in residence with Cleveland Clinic's Performing Arts Program. So I'd like to welcome all three of you today. Let me just mention that this program is being called Proven Models of Music for Educational Growth. And so let me just begin by asking you, Kim, talk about the Suzuki method. What is that?
Okay, the Suzuki method is based on language learning. And it sort of teaches things in an opposite way, where rather than starting with specifics and going to a big picture, like starting with a small piece and going to a more advanced piece, we start with a global picture and go back to specifics. So with language, when children are first born, they are surrounded by language, and not just the sound, but they see it visually. They may be doing games at home where they're working with letters. And so they come to speaking already knowing what the language sounds like. So Dr. Suzuki was playing in a string quartet one day with his family, and he had this brilliant idea. All Japanese students speak Japanese. And he shouted this out, and people looked at him like he was crazy. And he got to thinking, wow, that's a really difficult skill to be able to do, to speak a language. And everybody can do it. Let's figure out how a child learns how to speak, and let's adapt that to music. And he was a violinist. And this was after World War II. So he started experimenting, and he had great success. So the students listened to models of excellent playing. And so when they come to their lessons, they already know the music before they start. And it's a very positive learning environment. Just like language, we know that every child's going to learn how to speak their native tongue. So by using this method, we know that every child can succeed with the proper environment. So that's the basis of it.
I think that's fascinating. I mean, that's true. When you're a baby, wherever you're born, you learn to speak that language. And so Dr. Suzuki felt then you should be able to learn to play the violin if you are surrounded by that environment. That's really, really interesting. Now, Stephen, you were involved with the El Sistema program, and you were saying in the other room that there's a lot of similarities between the two. Can you tell us what that is?
Yes. Can you all hear me? Okay, very good. El Sistema is a program that began in Venezuela, in Caracas, by a man named Jose Antonio Abreu, and it's an orchestral-based method which has a lot of the same goals as Suzuki. Very positive learning environment, and his idea was, even though he was a musician, the music was sort of secondary to this being a social program. He wanted to be able to take at-risk children who were free many hours a day when their parents were working, and he would gather them and get them involved in orchestras so that they would be basically off the streets in a safe place. And he wanted to give them something of value so that they would feel valuable. He's a very eloquent speaker. He came to CIM, where we work, a couple of years ago for graduation and talked, and he's really an amazingly charismatic man. And that's one of the similarities with a method that goes from nothing to becoming huge. There's usually some sort of person who really is the embodiment of all the ideals, and he was that person, and he's really makes a great case for his what he was trying to do. So he talks about poverty generating anonymity. That's one of his quotes. Poverty generates anonymity. An orchestra means joy, motivation, teamwork, success. To sing and to play together means to intimately coexist. Music is immensely important in the awakening of the sensibility and in the forging of values. And then later he says, from the minute a child is taught how to play an instrument, he is no longer poor. He becomes a child in progress who will become a citizen. So his real goal was to get these kids to feel included in a community where they had a lot of peers, where everyone was sort of dependent on each other, and they would feel some responsibility to each other and becomes part of something that would keep them away from all the dangers that poverty imposes, the dangers of becoming involved in a gang, getting involved with drugs, getting in, all these various things. And he talks also about, he talks about how poverty generates anonymity, he also talks about the affluence of the spirit, and that the work in music or in art in general, the importance of it is to create nobility of spirit, which then gives people self-worth, and if they have more self-worth, they're going to have a more valuable life for themselves and for others.
Wow, that was a great explanation. Thank you. So when you talk about East Cleveland, a lot of people probably think of poverty and so forth, but when I saw your class yesterday, Ariel, when Stephen said affluence of the spirit, that's what I saw when I saw you teaching yesterday. So could you please talk about Rainbow Strings?
Yeah, first of all, my students blow my mind. They are just some of the most beautiful, amazing, intelligent, thoughtful young people I've ever interacted with. And I've taught a lot of kids. I'm not obviously as seasoned or veteran of an instructor as my colleagues on stage here, but I've taught in a number of different environments. And the Rainbow Strings program, first of all, is a Suzuki style program. So it uses a lot of the language building concepts that Kimberly talked about. And we don't read music. And that's right away is a key component of the Suzuki method. But we sing the notes to songs. And for instance, what you witnessed yesterday was we were learning Jingle Bells or certain songs in pieces. And we build on them just like you build on your own vocabulary. We learn them in sections. And we do it in a way that it is difficult for them. And they do sense a struggle at times. And even last week we were doing simple gifts with my 6th grade girls. And they were complaining because I wanted them to go on. And they said, no, we can't do it. And I said, yes, you can. And we're going to. And we worked through it for a few more minutes. And then they could get to the end of the song. So the Rainbow Strings program, it's a great thing in and of itself to give any child the opportunity to learn music, but then to see how it transforms them. It fills them with joy, with energy, and even in our group classes after school, whether 4 kids come or 10 kids come, there's a sense of family from the cutest 1st and 2nd graders who have a hard time sitting still long enough to play through songs to the 6th graders who in a way, they have them to look up to and to mentor. And in that way, there's a lot of specialty programs in schools, but when you can have a group class that encompasses all grades where you can do, that not everyone can do everything all the time, but that they're there together in class. And there's a lot of learning that happens between them that even I have nothing to do with.
Talk about the different sizes of violins, please.
Well, what's the smallest size? Because you probably know that answer better than me.
Well,
I mean, no, I don't. There's no special
this,
name.
From here to full size.
Yeah, it was just so wonderful that she has little 1st graders. They get a little tiny violin, and then she has the middle, and they get a middle one. And it was so amazing to see how you were fitting these violins to the children. And it was just fascinating.
And currently, the instruments are owned by the school, and it's a school-based program. So most of them do not take instruments home. We do all of our learning at school during the school day for a number of reasons. That seems to work well, and this is our 2nd year in the program. But it is fun to see them. Sometimes they're convinced that they need a bigger size, and I say, okay, try it and see if you can play the same song as well. And pretty quickly you'll figure out, oh, this one's a little heavy or it's a little hard to hold, and But no, it is fun to have the variety all in one room. They can see what they, as soon as they grow a little more, they can see what they're working towards.
I'm going to put you on the spot now. Could you please demonstrate for the audience how the 6th grader did simple gifts with the 1s and the 3s and the A's and the O's, and the little tune. Can you do that for me, please?
Wow, sure. So I'm about to sing, and so I'm sorry.
No, really.
But basically, so the quickest way that we can do this, the most efficient way that we can get songs learned. We can hold violins and talk about posture, but the quickest way that we can get songs ready for school-wide or district-wide performances is by talking through the strings and the numbers. And I'm amazed because I learned violin in a public school program where I had to read music right away. But these girls and boys, they remember the notes and the strings correctly, and they sing it on pitch, which is also impressive because if you know anything about perfect pitch versus not, she sang a particular student yesterday, and I asked her, because I said, play simple gifts for my friend Miss Johnson here. And she said, no. I said, well, sing it first and then do it.
And this is what she did.
And she said, A 3 3 E 1 3 1 2 3 3 2 1 E 3 E A E 1 E A. And she went all the way through the song like that,
so beautiful.
From memory. Doesn't take an instrument home, has class once a week, comes to group class as often as she can after school. She sang it perfectly on pitch by memory and then performed it for Miss Johnson on the spot. And I thought, well, there's something else in these kids, it just shows what they're capable of. And And I think even teachers sometimes can be, guilty. I know I am of being hesitant. How much can I push them? Or I want to keep it easy so that we feel like we definitely can do something. But then they go and blow your mind, and that's just how it is. So.
And I think it really speaks to the idea of high expectations. And I want to thank Kim for allowing me to watch a movie of Dr. Suzuki's life, and the fact that he said all children can learn. And so often that becomes a little cliche where people say it, but they really don't believe it. But I think just in watching your class yesterday, from the little tiny first grader to the sixth graders, they had this confidence that brought tears to my eyes. And I could tell that was through you, because you were able to make them believe that they could do it. And it was just a really fascinating thing. So I want to thank you.
Well, they did it.
Can I interject?
Yes, I want you to.
A couple other similarities with El Sistema. I mean, there's so many, but the delay of music reading is also part of El Sistema. Okay. I know when I was personally involved in it, we used a lot of solfege. So the students were actually learning to solfege the melodies before they would play it. Then they would learn to sing it, perhaps with finger numbers. So they were getting the note name, the actual Italian note names, the fingerings, and the rhythm and so forth before they ever actually applied it to the instrument. So that is also a similarity. Also the idea, and I think this is really what drew me into getting involved with this, because I'm primarily a Suzuki teacher as well, is the similarity that El Sistema also has the belief in limitless possibilities. There's not a sense of you're born with a certain ability to play an instrument or not. And I know, having worked with so many students, I really honestly believe this. I've met so many adults that say, oh, I wish I kept with this instrument, but I wasn't talented at it. And that was sort of an old model that people have had for a long time. And what we've really discovered is that everyone has this ability to do this, and not just to do it, but to do it to a really high level. The idea that we can all participate in art, that we can all express through art, that this is a human ability and a human right that children need in order to develop as fully functional human beings. I know one of the bass players of the Cleveland Orchestra in a meeting expressed this really beautifully, and he said, when we talk about schools and we focus just on things that are going to help a student's vocation as they get older, we're talking about teaching them how to work, and we teach animals how to work as well. There has to be something in life that's of deeper value than just your vocation. And so the ability to express yourself is something that is really important and really necessary for all of us. So when people talk about cutting arts from the schools, this is what I would say. Our education, when arts help to promote creativity and a deep appreciation for other people as well. And those are things that you can't learn from many other fields, and they're just as important. I think we really have to have that.
That's very true. And I want to just mention a couple of statements. I asked Ariel's students, what's so special about violin? Why do you come here after school, and why do you enjoy it? And one young lady said, it's fun. And I said, well, does it do anything for you? And she said, it slows me down. When I'm upset, it makes me calm. And I just thought that was so special. And then the other young lady, my voice is getting all shaky and everything. When I asked her, she said, it's like a pretty cool instrument. When I'm sad, it cheers me up. And so here, and I'm saying that because of what you said, Stephen, it's just beyond this one-dimensional level of, learning to do something or whatever, but it's feeding the spirit. Yeah. And I just think that is really so special. So I want to move into the next area when we talk about educational growth. You spoke to that a little bit, Stephen, but some of the research, this is just some research that I looked up that talks about what arts can do for academic achievement. From PBS parents said the learning of do-re-mi's can help children excel in ways way beyond the basic ABCs. A child learning about music has to tap into multiple skill sets. Music education helps enhance the natural abilities of decoding sounds and words. Musical training physically develops the part of the left side of the brain known to be involved with processing language and can actually wire the brain's circuits in specific ways. And then I listened to a program on NPR called This Is Your Brain on Music. And they said musical education can improve children's ability to process speech. There was some other research that actually showed students scoring significantly higher on standardized tests in the areas of language arts and math. So, we have a state board of education that is talking about eliminating the requirement for subjects like music and art and physical education and other subjects. That's on the board right now. They're considering eliminating the requirement for that. So when you look at the value of music, we're talking about really, really doing some damage to a child's education. And so I want to move to the three of you and have each of you respond to the question, educational growth. If someone were to ask you to discuss the educational growth from Suzuki, the Suzuki method, Kim, what would you say?
Well, I think one of the major things that I see as I work with a young child into the high school years is learning how, the way the literature is put together in the Suzuki method, it's a step-by-step approach. And they're using real music rather than etudes. So if I have a student come in, like Ariel was mentioning, where they said, this piece is really difficult, I'm having real trouble. Well, let me show you how to break this down so we can make this easy. So we want to show them how to create a can't-fail environment. And I got a wonderful letter from a student of mine who graduated and went off to college, and she was going into earth science, and she wrote me and she says, I want to thank you so much for the lessons that you gave me, because once I got to college, I developed arthritis and I couldn't write. So I had to figure out a way to take my notes and work so that I could stay ahead of the game in my classes. So she said, I learned how to break the skills down into smaller steps so that I could succeed and then build off of those. So that to me is a huge skill.
And also when you talk about math and science and problem solving and being able to break things apart, that's certainly applicable to those subjects.
Yeah.
Stephen, what about El Sistema, educational growth? I know you've talked about some things already.
Yeah, just one practical figure that they discovered, that among the children involved in El Sistema in Venezuela, where it started, and now there are over 500,000 there. It's amazing. It has grown into this huge, huge movement. It is government sponsored. It, I know at least about 5 years ago, had a budget of $120 million a year for this program. So it's very heavily funded by the government and so forth, to the extent that people who get into the youth orchestras are actually given a stipend so that the time they spend doing that won't take away from money that the family might count on for them to be able to work with the rest of the family and so forth. But what they found is that among the children participating in El Sistema, the dropout rate, which nationally was over 26%, the dropout rate among the children who participated in El Sistema was under 7%. Now, it may have been partly that the kids who were drawn to this would have been less likely, but it's still a pretty significant figure. And one other thing I can say just about general brain development is that I had a student actually who was in a very, very severe car accident years ago, and he was in a coma for about a week before he woke up. And when he woke up, he could not talk, he could not communicate anything. And after about a week, he started coming out of it, and he made a full recovery, and the doctors actually attributed that to his music classes, saying that the additional sort of wiring of the circuitry of the brain had given him so many more pathways that his brain figured out how to reroute information from damaged portions of the brain through other parts of the brain, and he was able to make a full recovery.
Wow. That reminds me, when I was watching the movie on Dr. Suzuki, it talked about a young lady in Japan who, because of thalidomide, I think it's called, and her hand was damaged, and she wasn't able to use it. And it showed how, because of holding, I don't know how to hold it, but because of holding whatever, her hand actually got stronger, and she was able to start using her arm. It was amazing, just the value of this. Ariel, Kim, go ahead.
Can I? One of the things I want to mention about our programs too is I think one of the strengths is collaboration.
Yes.
And a Suzuki student, when they sign up to take lessons, a Suzuki program, they offer, the student comes twice a week. They come once a week for their private lesson. Sistema does the same thing, where you're working one-on-one with a teacher, working on specifics. And then they are learning the same repertoire, so they come again to play in a group class. And the group class is what I call their mistake class, meaning they can play, they can make mistakes, they can try, and there's nothing wrong with that. They're learning as they're playing and they're enjoying it. They're watching students that are older than them play. They're watching students that play at a higher level. They're watching students that play at a lower level. And they're all helping each other and collaborating. And for me, the joy that comes from teaching is when I see a child go up to another child and compliment them on, wow, you have such a beautiful sound, or, oh, I loved how the way you got up there and played with such courage. So that's character building.
Thank you. And Ariel, you've had a few challenges where you haven't been able to transfer the Suzuki method totally with every component to what you're doing with Rainbow Strings. Can you just talk about a couple of the challenges?
Yeah, well, first I'll just say some of the really great things that happen are a lot of the things that you just described exactly, and that even along the lines of the academic correlations is I'm not a trained classroom teacher, and so I'm a music teacher, I'm a violin teacher. But even with my younger students, I've written like the word violin or just big keywords about music on the board. And even right before we come in kindergarten to have their weekly lesson, I'll have them spell them out. So I'm trying to make as many cross references between what they do in the rest of the building and then what they do in my classroom. But some of the challenges are inherent in, like you said, in certain areas of Northeast Ohio, like East Cleveland. Kids come from a variety of backgrounds, and I've got some really encouraging, heavily involved moms that I communicate with on a regular basis, and I have students who are brilliant and bright, and I have a hard time reaching parents. And parental involvement and family support is a really big part of music instruction, and it's a big part of the Suzuki method, which they can go on and on about. Parents typically observe every lesson, but if the
parents learn the instrument, don't they?
Yeah, they learn alongside
in the Suzuki method. Parents actually learn the instrument so they can practice with their children at home.
But the challenge of it's during the school day. So first of all, some parents last year, in particular, who were maybe already in the building for PTO reasons or things like that, were able to come in and observe their child's lesson. But there's going to be some of those barriers. You're just not going to get the level of parent involvement because it's during the school day, because it's at school. And then just some of the really unique, difficult challenges and circumstances these students face outside of the building that have nothing to do with their education, but that they inevitably bring in.
Yeah. Can you just talk about, and I just think, this is just an example that I think really represents what's going on as far as music and music being important. So I we're going to finish up in a few minutes, but just very briefly, like in one or two sentences, just one sentence, could each of you tell if you were trying to convince somebody that music should be in their school, one sentence, what would each of you say? How's that for a challenge?
Ladies first.
Oh, one sentence, that's so cruel. I
Yes.
could go for hours.
One sentence.
It truly changes their lives. That can go, we can talk for hours about every single way that it does, but it truly does change their life. It's not just a fun, privileged activity to sort of add into a collection of extracurriculars. It changes their lives.
I think it brings happiness and gives them something to share with others.
That was good.
And Stephen?
As you know, I have trouble sticking to one sentence.
I know.
Music brings a level of joy that is beyond happiness, that is a deep connection with other people and with the person and their own psyche.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Today at the City Club, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Stephanie's turn.
Today at the City Club, we are enjoying a panel discussion on proven models of music for educational growth featuring Ariel Clayton, Kimberly Meier-Sims, and Stephen Sims, and our moderator is Meryl Johnson. We welcome all of you here and those joining us via our live webcast sponsored by the University of Akron. Be sure to tune in to our Friday forums on 90.3 WCPN, WVIZ PBS, 104.9 WCLV Idea Stream, or one of the many radio stations across the region and country that carry City Club programs. Television broadcasts of the City Club are made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC. This Friday, November 21st, the City Club welcomes Nora Ericott, Assistant Professor at New Century College at George Mason University, to discuss Operation Protective Edge, the Gaza Strip in context. For more information about our upcoming and past forums, please visit us online at cityclub.org. We welcome guests at tables hosted by the Cleveland Transformation Alliance, Global Awareness Through the Arts and Sciences, and the Northeastern Ohio Education Association. We thank you for your support. We also welcome students to today's program. Joining us today are students from Shaw High School. Student participation is made possible by a generous grant from the Fred E. Scholl Charitable Foundation. Will the students please stand and be recognized? It is now time for the traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. We just ask that your questions be short and to the point and actually be questions. Holding the microphone today is our content associate, Teddy Eisenberg. We can take the first question.
So there's been a lot of research that much of the achievement gap, or what helps students to succeed the most, is this idea of grit. And Ariel, you give a great example about music helping students to learn to continue to persevere when things are challenging. Do you think that in your experience that this perseverance in music moves on to other areas of their lives?
I think absolutely. I think when, I only see my students in one setting, generally in a music-related setting, but in terms of how it affects their perseverance in school, I think you talked to one of my students' moms the other day about her study habits and how, can you explain that actually?
Yes, the mom had talked about, she has two daughters in Ariel's program, and she mentioned how one daughter is kind of, very fancy and likes to move around and everything, but she said she has seen where it has actually settled her other daughter down, and where she actually focuses more on her homework and sticks to it. And so that certainly speaks to your question, and the mom is able to compare her two daughters and see where one is actually getting a huge benefit. Not saying the other daughter's not, but the mom can see it in the behavior of one of her daughters.
Yeah. So I would agree the focus is so important in everything that we do. And I think when children are playing music and they're playing it, they're focused into the sound. And I think that helps when they're reading, when they're having a conversation. So absolutely.
When we take a child who's we give them something that's difficult to do and prove to them that they can do it. That means so much to them. They develop a confidence that they can do it in other areas as well.
And then on a quick side note, I wasn't born playing the violin. I was once a student as well, and I remember what it was like to have this struggle as a practicer working on a piece, and then realizing maybe in high school when homework started to get serious, how to break down and organize my to-do. Like I'm a woman of lists and so in certain ways to organize my life, but I think a lot of that is transferable from music and having to break down how to get through a piece of music, even just a song, whether it's technically or reading the notes on the page. So I think we could all even attest personally to that as music itself, musicians.
I think one of the things I tell students when I'm working with them, they're doing something that's very difficult and they're just about to give up, and I say, look, do you know why this is so hard? I said, your brain is growing, and I can see it. And I really can. And it's so much fun to watch a student struggle through something, and then you give them a little more information, and they finally get it, and you can actually see the brain go, whoo, wow, I got a new pathway here. And then that opens up more pathways. There's a great book, and there's an author here in town, Daniel Coyle, wrote a book called The Talent Code. And I don't know if he's spoken here, but I highly recommend you look into that because it talks about how the brain grows, and you can actually see pictures of the neural net growing in the brain. Fantastic for children.
Excuse me. Hello, I'm Brandon Clancy from Shaw High School. I'm a senior. I play guitar, and I was also in Suzuki when I was in like preschool to 3rd grade, I think. And my question is kind of maybe a continuation of the last question. Do you believe that we have, or do you believe that educators have a responsibility, or that it's even possible to integrate such a creative community in classrooms that aren't specifically music, that, you know, are science, math, English? Do you think that we can incorporate the fundamentals of your program that involve that nurturing community, bringing professionals in to talk to the kids, having it be an interactive process? Do you believe we can incorporate that into the classrooms? Thank you.
That's a great question.
I definitely believe this. And I was telling Meryl yesterday, a parent in one of my students was the dean of engineering at the University of Iowa, and he embraced these teaching ideas of collaboration, and he is now the president of Olin School of Engineering. And I just heard an ad on the radio as I was driving this morning. But he has worked with the idea of collaboration. He brings in the Orpheus Chamber Ensemble into his engineering school to talk about, this ensemble is run, the players, there's no conductor, so they have to make decisions about how to play something specifically. They also run it financially. So they bring these musicians up to talk to the engineering school about how to work collaboratively together in making decisions. Because whenever you're talking, obviously everybody's got a bunch of different ideas, and you have to come to some sort of consensus, and you have to still like each other when you finish with a consensus. So I absolutely think, and I also like to see that classes integrate, different academics integrate with each other, because I think we can learn from each other with everything that we do.
We know how much overlap there is between different fields. I do not know the current statistics, but I remember hearing when I was going to college that the highest acceptance rate into medical school was among music majors that were going into medicine, even above pre-med students at that time, because they knew that music students had worked through many of the same type of issues that they would need for medicine.
And actually, there is, it's funny you mentioned medicine. aside from my work at Chambers, I do a lot of other performances, and I've done some other educational initiatives. And one of them was in the last 2 years at the Cleveland Museum of Art. They've got a great education department, and they did a collaborative program with resident physicians at university hospitals. So UH, super stressed out, tired, overworked, resident doctors who sometimes tensions can fly, or they've got different philosophies for how to solve a problem in a hospital room. They brought them into the art museum for team building, and they put them in front of different paintings and had them interpret things. And then they brought them in front of paintings with myself and a cellist, and they had them what they called sound lenses, where we would play a certain piece of music while they looked at this art and talked about it, and then we would play a totally different piece of music while they looked at this art and then they talked about it, and they came up with totally different solutions based on what they were feeling and experiencing with these artistic mediums. But keep in mind, they're in this really scientific field where they're taught to study by the book and test by the book and protocol and procedure, but they're having to learn to think more creatively, to collaborate, and even just process for themselves. So yeah, it's happening, and I would love to see it in more school classrooms. I know, and for instance, this was adults, but I think it's real. Yeah.
And I think it's great when you're learning too to go from something that's familiar to something that's unfamiliar. So if you're learning a discipline, to bring people that can interact with the students to relate it to other things that they may connect with.
Well, this is turning out to be more closely related than I thought when I originally formulated this question. When some of us were young, there was a significant problem with the lack of trained string players in orchestras. And at this point in time, as many of us who are connected with music understand, there's a glut of string players and a lot of applicants for every orchestral position or whatever may happen to be the audition thing. So I was thinking of how this would relate to job training in other realms, and how we can apply the philosophy and the methods to job training for things unrelated to music. But it does relate somewhat to the discussion of the Orpheus and all. Thank you.
So how would you relate job training to
Well,
Suzuki and Sistema?
One of the things that I see at the Cleveland Institute of Music, where I'm working, and I've got a student over here that was in my training, with a couple students over here in my training class. Since the music industry is saturated with string players, which is great, but there are only so many orchestral jobs, there are only so many performers, every musician is going to end up teaching. And one of the things that I have the pleasure of doing is training students. So we at CIM, obviously very high-skilled, very highly trained musicians. These students are wanting to learn how to teach and want to learn how to teach better. And they are actually, I know they're teaching actively in the Cleveland community right now, several people. So I think from that standpoint, hopefully a lot of these students that are maybe looking for professional performing jobs will actually go into teaching and build our communities.
And when you look at the skills that, having gone through Suzuki, the collaboration, being able to get along with others, the discipline, the perseverance, all those are great skills for being a good worker. So if someone is actually going to job training, then they really have a nice collection of skills that'll certainly make them marketable. So I think that also is a way it relates.
Did that answer?
Greetings. I have two questions. I wanted to see how can an activist get involved, or the public can get involved to assist in such a sad to hear process that they want to take out the music and art in the schools, in which I think they already started to do that. Correct me if I'm not correct. And B, how strong is a politician that is working with the schools to advocate to fight to get it back, or do we have any policies that are coming up that you can share with us that's coming down the pipe that we can support? Thanks.
Well, I think the first thing I would say is to work through your school board. And as far as I know, most school boards have sessions, times during the meeting when you can have community input. And so I think it's really important. I mean, I look at school board meetings, and most times community members only show up if there's a real, hot issue on the agenda. But I think regular attendance at school board meetings is one way. Our state school board, if you go online, you can find, there's 19 members. You can find all of their emails. And I think that's another way. This vote that I talked about is taking place in December to decide whether they're going to actually remove the requirement for things like art and music, phys ed, social workers, guidance counselors, librarians, and so forth. So if you go online, just put in Ohio State School Board, you can come up with all of their emails and be in contact. But I think the most important thing is to do what you're doing now, is to attend forums like this and to make sure that you're informed and educated about the issue.
And to encourage people to vote.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. Yeah.
The other, through my years of being in music, I've seen programs start. I've seen communities get very active. School system starts a music program, great success, doing really well, and then things get cut from the bottom. They start with 3rd grade, 4th grade, and then finally you don't have a program anymore. From my standpoint, what I've seen in communities is parental support. If parents are out there and they want this and they're going to fight for it, that's where the strength's going to come. If those parents in that community want music in their schools and they're willing to fight for that, can't see why it can't succeed.
And I would agree. You start from the bottom, from the younger ages, because starting music in 6th or 7th grade isn't nearly as successful as starting in 3rd or 4th. It's harder to learn, and it's actually much harder in many ways to learn an instrument when you're older than it is when you're younger, especially the expressive part of it, because it's just like learning languages. It's much harder as an adult to pick up a second language than it is for a child. You develop the nuances and so forth when you start these things early.
And also from birth to 5, that's when the brain is just taking in all kinds of stuff.
I also think time commitment.
Yeah.
I can't echo enough what you just said about parental involvement. And I had my students, I invited them to an evening orchestra concert, knowing that there's no field trip bus or anything that could be provided for them by the school, so it really had to be the initiative of the parents to bring them. And it was actually a really wonderful evening. And actually, can I mention this about the turnout of the...
I think you should. I think that's an important story.
Because So I sent home a permission slip for the City Music Cleveland Orchestra concert in October, and some of the musicians are here, which is awesome. But I had four students come with parents, and 10 to 12 had turned in permission slips. And even that day, I had spoken on the phone with most of those parents as well, and they were all very excited. And it was sad that some of them weren't able to come. And I saw one of those students in the hallway the next day after the concert, and I said, "Hey, I missed you at the concert. Why didn't you come?" And she said, "My mom had to choose between getting enough gas in the car to get through the week or being able to drive me to the concert." And it's that even in these areas of Cleveland, there is even a desire for parental involvement. It's there, and sometimes there just aren't the resources, and that's also a huge challenge. Yeah. But the parental involvement is critical.
Yeah.
When Ariel told me that story yesterday, I said life happens, and that I think I told her I wanted her to share that story today, because so often people make assumptions. Oh, they don't really care. They don't want to do this, and it's just so unfair to do that, because this story, I think, is just a perfect example of how that parent was saying, if I'm going to have enough gas to finish out the week, you're not going to be able to go to the concert. And these are the kinds of decisions that are made. And so, when you talk about inequality of wealth in this country, I think those are the kinds of things that we have to address. How this child was not able to go to a concert because of the poverty of the family. And I just think that story is just such a classic example of what's going on in this country.
And with the schools, the more we cut out things like arts, the people who are the most affected are the people who most need it, I would argue. I mean, someone from a wealthy neighborhood is probably going to be able to afford to take music lessons whether or not it's in their schools. Oddly enough, those school systems tend to keep it because they have the money, the resources to keep it, and they see the value in it. But we have to really fight for the school systems and so forth that are less advantaged. The founder of El Sistema has one quote that I have to get in because I think it's so important. He says, "Culture for the poor must never be poor culture."
I like that.
It's important that everyone has the right and the ability to be exposed to art at a high level.
And to experience some joy.
Yes.
To experience some
Yes.
joy. Next question.
Good afternoon. I'm Anthony Price. I'm a junior at Shaw High School, and I'm also a young musician as well, so thanks for having me. My question is, how has music impacted each and every one of you on stage? Because I know, like, you wake up in every day and teach music to students and you tell them to do this and that, but what's that push with music that encouraged you to keep teaching, keep changing the world through music?
I'm going to start. When I was 7 years old, my mom was able to give my brother and me private piano lessons. And through that, I sang. My mom taught music for 26 years, so I was surrounded by music. You know, my brother and I would go to her programs when she would have little programs at her school where she was teaching. And I just grew up just appreciating music and just loving it. I have such great memories, and right now I sing and I play the piano, and it's just something that's why I say experiencing joy, because music just gives me joy. It really, really does. And that's why I mentioned the concerts and how when every child in Cleveland was able to go to Severance Hall and to witness the orchestra, that to me was so enriching for my experience when I was growing up.
For me, when people ask me what it is I do, I teach a lot, and I also perform a lot, and I tell people that I'm a musician and that I also teach and play. And to me, to be one or the other, some people can do it, but I've never been able to really separate the two. And I tell people that teaching keeps my playing honest, and playing keeps my teaching honest. So in my life, it's really just that I do this thing with a violin, and sometimes I'm imparting what it is I do, and sometimes I'm sharing what I do with performing. So with how music education has impacted my life, it's that the two, it's all this sort of one blended thing. And I think that with a lot of things that anyone does, whether it's a child learning a skill or a subject in school, or an adult in their profession, that you've got these abilities to blend the two of learning and imparting at the same time.
I think what keeps me going, I think of teaching as artistry. And it's something that you have to continually work on your whole life, just like playing an instrument. And I heard one of the teachers at CIM say, he said, every day I go to school. I'm teaching, but every day I go to school and I learn more from my students maybe than they're learning from me. So every day to me is a challenge, but it's an absolute joy, because even though I've been doing this for a long time, I expect the unexpected. I hear sentences from students that just blow me out of the water. With the things they come up with. I'm like, wow, I wish I'd thought of that. That was amazing. So for me, it's just, it's just magical. And I love learning. I love getting up every day and just learning something new.
I would say music there are a couple things. Music itself really feeds me, and if I don't keep practicing myself, I find I have less energy to teach, less enthusiasm about everything in life. The minute I start playing again, I start getting excited again, and I start enjoying it. So that's, for me, the music itself is such a valuable thing. The teaching is a different thing in a way, and what I teach is music, but I teach a lot more, hopefully, and it comes out through the music. And I grew up as a sort of shy kid and so forth, without a lot of friends when I was young. I was very studious and so forth, and it's helped me learn to connect with people in a way that I never could when I was young. I felt socially awkward and so forth, but being able to teach, I'm connecting with all these kids, and I found it just to be the most amazing thing. I never in my wildest dreams before I went to college thought I'd ever be working with children. I never thought I had any desire to do that, and I was planning to become a college teacher. That was my goal. But once I started doing it, it became sort of addictive. It was a wonderful thing, and I love working with these kids and seeing so much potential and just experiencing their joy. That gives me so much satisfaction.
I believe it was John Dryden that said music is well said to be the speech of angels. And my question deals kind of with the interrelatedness of music literacy and language literacy. I have a friend of mine that works for Seeds of Literacy here in Cleveland. If I were to give you a percentage of the language illiteracy in Cuyahoga County, it would blow you away. And I'm just wondering if there is within the school system or within the county any kind of programs that try to link together language literacy and music literacy. As one of the students here was mentioning, taking those concepts of teaching music and linking them to different areas of study, and specifically language, because music is a language of its own. And just as when you're exposed as a young child to multiple languages, I mean, if everyone in each of these 50 United States spoke a different language, we'd all be polyglots because we'd have that exposure. And I'm just wondering if there's anything within the school system in Cuyahoga County or Cleveland where there is an effort to reduce illiteracy in language by linking that with a musical program.
I'm not immediately personally familiar with anything along that, but I'm not, like I said earlier, I'm not a classroom teacher. So in fact, you're at a table with a number of amazing educators, and you probably could figure that out already. But like I said, in terms of the ways that I try my best is when I know that I have kids that are struggling in their classrooms, teachers will actually mention to me, because I pull kids out during the school day to do lessons, if so-and-so is not performing as well on a test or they're having an issue. And then for a couple weeks, even at the third grade level, because I mentioned it earlier, I spell with my kindergarten students before we start our lessons a lot of days. Even with third graders, I say, hey, why don't we, I'm gonna pick some violin words and we're gonna go over those before we have a lesson. Because even if you do that for 2 minutes, even in it's successful, you've got a way to build their confidence to approach it themselves too.
Okay, we're going to have to close, and I'm sorry that we're not going to be able to hear from everybody on your question. But I just want to finish up with a quote from Dr. Suzuki. It says, "I want to make good citizens. If a child hears fine music from the day of his birth and learns to play it himself, he develops sensitivity, discipline, and endurance. He gets a beautiful heart." And I think that quote just represents what this whole program has been about today. Today at the City Club, we have been enjoying a panel discussion on proven models of music for educational growth, featuring Ariel Clayton, Kimberly Meier-Sims, and Stephen Sims. Thank you, Ms. Clayton. Thank you, Ms. Meier-Sims.
Thank you.
Mr. Sims. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And because I forgot to do this first, I'm going to do it twice. This forum is now adjourned.